Okay. Get the lift in. Where'd you go?
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to or good afternoon. It's morning in California. I was on a call there earlier this morning, so sorry. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the May meeting of the Capital Improvements Committee. We've had our safety briefing and our call to order. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting. Ms. Hall moves. Ms. Campbell seconds. All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously, even though Roger. Okay. You approve, though, right? Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda: approval of the agenda. Ms. Grabowski moves. Ms. Hall seconds. All in favor? Aye. Passed. And with that, Mr. Jackson said our finances are spectacular, but I'm going to make him go through the report anyway.
They will get us through June. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to run through them briefly. Excuse me. Slide 8 basically shows our collections through the month of March for East Blocks 2 and 3, and also 4. As of March 2025, we collected $410,824,248. We're still on target monthly as far as collections. We're still collecting between $10 and $11 million per month, so that will get us through the end of East Blocks 4, the shortened collection period for East Blocks 4. The next graph just shows the revenue by month for East Blocks 4 for calendar years 22 through 25. Next slides 10 through 12 just shows revenue summaries for East Blocks 2, East Blocks 3, and East Blocks 4.
Does this have our amended?
No, this does not have the amended as of the end of March or April. We did the amended last month, right?
Yeah, we did the amendment.
During
We
the
did
month.
the amendment in the May board meeting, and these financials are as of April 30th.
Okay. Thank you.
So they will show up 2 months from now. And slides 13 through 22 really just gets into the unallocated funds of East Blocks 2 and the projects that the unallocated funds were used for. Slides 23 through 25 gets into the unallocated funds for East Blocks 3. And as we get to slide 26, it's just a expenditure summary, again, for all 3 splotches: East Blocks 2, East Blocks 3, and East Blocks 4. Now, I'm going to really skip the rest of the slides. Really, slides 29 through 57 gets into the expenditure side of the projects, and I would like to turn that over to the capital projects team so they can talk about the projects and the budgets as they go through them. Are
Ms.
there any
Hall?
questions about the revenue?
Mr. Jackson, briefly go over what happens again when we reach our caps.
Our current plan right now, we have reached the cap. We're going to reach the cap during this quarter. At this point, we're going to stop collections at the end of the quarters. We're going to stop collections during the month of June, and we're going to start E5 collections in July.
Let me
So
stop
our
you.
cap is based upon the referendum that the voters approved, and that's what according to state law, that's what we should use to stop collections once we get to that point. But they allow us to continue to collect during a quarter, even if we reach collections within a month.
So we stop collections. What does that entail? I mean, so I'm at the store, my penny on the dollar no longer is taken from me as the,
No, no, ma'am. When I say stop collections, we stop collections for East Plus 4. The penny sales tax continues. So in July, we start collections for East Plus 5. So your tax does not
okay,
change.
all right, so, all
I'm
right,
sorry if I confused you. Your tax does not change.
okay. And that money begins to go into E5.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, are we projecting differently so that at the cap in E5, it'll be more in tune with what we actually think it's going to be as opposed, so we were very low this time?
Yes, we were aggressive. I'm going to let
Absolutely. So we projected over 700,000 in
Million.
E5, million, sorry, 700 million. I'm too tired apparently, in E5 compared to the 400 million in E4. So we did do an increase based on what our actual collections have been in E4.
Okay,
plus a little cushion, I think, to answer your question.
okay. Now, if E5 hadn't passed, what would have happened? No, I'm just trying to.
Fortunately, we did the first referendum early, and I believe the plan was to come back in November if it had not passed, to try it again.
And ultimately, if East Bloss didn't pass, then we would have to come back to the board with a plan that would be very limited on what we could accomplish, because we
Of
cannot,
course.
do all the wonderful things that we are able to do without the help of the
Well,
East
yeah,
Bloss.
process.
that goes without saying, but I'm just glad to know that we have projected much higher
Yes,
this
yes.
time, so we shouldn't run into any
Yes.
problems.
And East Plus is always a win-win for school districts because you have to
Yes.
think about it in school districts. Basically, at some point, you're going to pay to replace schools. So
Yeah.
either use a property tax or you use East Plus. It's
Yeah.
one under two.
I'm always surprised when I see referendums fail in school districts anywhere in the country, because it is a win-win. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. All right, I will turn it over to the capital projects team. Try to get them to where they need to start.
All right, who's up for our safety update?
Sorry, thought I was slide 58. I was late. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, fencing and gates, that's what I've been asked to come and talk about. So we'll go through this. We've only got a couple of slides. I know there's been a lot of discussion lately around fencing, gates, and what our plans are for ensuring schools are secure. And so that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about. So layered security. So you'll often hear Chief talking about layered security and what we're doing to make sure that our facilities have steps in place to ensure that they are protected from the perimeter all the way to the interior of the school. And so a lot of what we do is focused on just that. And we follow, guidelines through some of the organizations that you'll see on the screen. But the Partner Alliance for Safer Schools, or PASS, is really our guiding principle that we've been using in recent times, which is that icon at the bottom right, the layers of protection. But what we did initially, the Parsons study in 2018, that was kind of our initial guiding principle on what we were doing. The Parsons study took into account every single facility that we have, looked at areas such as fencing, access control, lighting on the parking lots and the perimeter, and kind of vestibules, all of the things that we've been kind of working towards, started with the Parsons study. So what we've been doing is looking at ways to funnel visitors and students in ways so that we can manage that campus a little bit more efficiently and effectively. Well-maintained fencing communicates that a school is actively being managed and is hopefully going to be also a deterrent to any unwanted or illegal activities that may happen. A lot of our schools are in setback from the roadway, in areas that may have a lot of transient or unhoused individuals, and so we've seen, especially on our unfenced campuses, a lot of those issues with people coming onto our porches to get out of the rain, and then teachers or custodians show up at early morning to open the school, and there's people there on the porch. So having fences in place for a lot of those areas will help kind of deter that as well. And so what we've been looking at is initially design specifications. Right now in our current design guidelines, it is not very robust to the way that fencing is spelled out. It's 6 bullet points and very brief. And so we've been looking at ways to kind of expand on those design specifications and those design guidelines to provide for a more robust and thorough process that architects, engineers, and contractors can use when we start looking at fencing and the process that we take to put fencing around perimeters and on our campuses. But at a basic, we're looking at 6 to 8 feet high to deter climbing, constructed of iron, tubular steel, or anti-climb mesh materials that are difficult to scale or hard to cut. But still allow for easy visibility from inside the campus. We don't want to obscure, the folks inside the campus being able to see what's on the outside of the perimeter. We're looking at ways to incorporate brick architectural elements where appropriate to soften the look and ensure that whatever fencing we are putting up matches the look of that facility. And I've got in a couple of slides some photos that I can show of kind of what we've done and where we're moving towards. Like I said earlier, horizontal rails and no footholds to prevent climbing, designed with lockable gates and controlled access points, which would remain closed during instructional hours. And that's important. We're looking at ways to control access to the campus, but we also don't want to stop how a campus functions day to day. We know that deliveries happen. Second Harvest comes to some schools every day. Kitchens get deliveries. Some students come late, leave early for work study. People have doctor's appointments, and so we don't want to have gates completely locked all the time to prevent access. So what we're looking at is access control. Having ways that we can put, the gates can be closed. We'll have access control. Somebody can buzz in or badge in just like you would for a front door, and the gate would open and it would close behind them. That way we know that campus is secure, even with people coming and going throughout the day. And then integrating, video surveillance and security monitoring. If we're already running networking out to a gate to provide access control, why not add an extra camera out there so we can monitor who's coming, who's going, and then we can use the back-end analytics of the new camera software that we're installing to monitor that 24/7. If somebody opens the gate late in the evening, early in the morning, or scales a fence, we'll know because the analytics will let us know what's happening on that campus, on that perimeter, before they get to the building and before we have a security alarm going off because somebody's broken in. And to do this, we're working as a collaborative team, capital projects, campus police, technology, maintenance, academic affairs, and school administration to talk about what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. All schools are designed differently. No one solution will fit every campus. And so we're working as a team, especially with that school administration piece, to identify how people are coming, how people are going, how that school operates. So we're making sure that we're able to provide for their needs while also maintaining a secure campus. And then strategically identifying schools where past incidents have occurred, any potential community dynamics that may highlight a need for enhanced fencing. We're looking at those locations to start with first. That way we can kind of expand off of that. We know we've had incidents happen. We know we've had people, come onto our campuses during school hours with ill intent. We know we've had unhoused individuals that have possibly posed a threat to somebody coming on the campus in the morning. And so we're starting at those locations to, work our way out to identify the greater threat and the greater need. And then we're working with design professionals. We are not the end-all, be-all, know-it-all about fencing. So we're working with professionals in that space to help us identify the best practices, the best way to accomplish our needs, and what we can do to move forward. And so here's a couple of examples of fencing on our campuses. The one on the left is White Bluff Elementary. That fence is set far away from the roadway. There's a lot of green space between the road, the sidewalk, and the fence. And it's, just a basic, iron-styled fence that runs across the campus. What's also important is as we are doing this, we're putting strategic access points for people to come and go off of that campus. In the past, students would just cross across the middle of the road, walk across the front yard, and enter the campus. We're now moving those entry points to crosswalks and primary intersections. So it's driving that foot traffic to a point that we want them to cross the road, which is safer for the students. But it's also going to help us manage who's coming and going on that campus throughout the day. The image on the right is Isle of Hope. That is a white fence. It matches the white facade of that school, that building. A lot of other white picket fences, white colored fences in that neighborhood, in that area. So it's not going to detract or take away from what we already see in that community. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. And the image in the middle, that incorporates some brick elements to kind of break up that long span of fencing. There's some trees in the front to kind of help break up some of that visibility as well. And so that's, also kind of matches the brick on that building in the background. So that's kind of the idea and the goal that we're trying to accomplish. And I yield to questions.
Ms. Hall?
Can you tell me what did you say anti-climb mesh? What is that?
So on some locations, we've got gates that have push bars on the inside for egress. And so what we've done is we've put a mesh screen just in those locations, or we've put fencing, those vertical, spires closer together so people can't reach through, they can't climb over. It makes it more difficult for people to climb over the fence to enter the campus.
Okay, and in the Isle of Hope picture, it looks like fencing is along the side, but it's not in the
Yes.
front of the school.
It is. That's a good point. So what we've also been looking at is maybe not putting fencing all the way across the front of a school. Like Butler, for instance, that's a school that we've been recently looking at. And because of the way that school is designed, there's not really a lot of entry points at the front of the building. A lot of them are kind of tucked in the back or kind of on the side, which is similar to how Isle of Hope is. The only real entry point is that front door. And so there may not be a need to run fencing all the way across the front, but it's bringing it up to the sides so that the only point that you really have vulnerable is that front door, which is what we're looking at Butler. But looking at a school like New Hampstead, you've got the auditorium, you've got the little breezeway between the auditorium and the main school, the kitchen. There's multiple entry points at the front of New Hampstead. And so that's causing us to have more fencing in the front of the school just because of all the extra, vulnerable points.
So let me-
Okay, well, my comment is that I'm very happy to see the words design professionals involved, and I'm wondering if we're able to see these design ideas before they're enacted, if we're able to actually see what it's going to look like. And can anything be undone that is in place now? I continue to ask that something happen at Myers,
Yes.
because that is just horrific, and at Juliet Low Elementary.
So, well, first of all, good afternoon. I traveled late last night, so I can be here. I got here about 3 o'clock this morning,
Thank
so I
you, Chief.
apologize to this board for my tardiness. But this was important enough. I was actually off today, but I wanted to come in. I know how important this was to all of you. Fencing is very important. It's part of our perimeter strategies to keep our schools safe. I will say that every campus is different, right? And the fencing and gate strategy that we have to fit that scenario. But in that scenario, we want to make sure we have appropriate ingress and egress in order to get people in and out. Always remember that safety and security there will always be some inconvenience. You won't be able to walk out of the school into your front yard or directly to your car. But I would tell you that we have to do everything we can to help mitigate and protect over $1 billion of assets that we have throughout Chatham County. Perimeter fencing allows us to do this. If you've ever been part of a crisis where there was an intruder that was en route to your school or a threat, having that perimeter fencing or something there to mitigate that person from arriving at the front door, you would appreciate it more. What's at Myers could be better, okay? We acknowledge that, and it will be better. We acknowledge that that is not the vision or the picture that I want you to see of what fencing looked like. We know of incidents, and you all know of incidents that have happened where it showed up at the front door. Horrific. And if we can prevent it, I can tell you the principal that was there before had been asking for perimeter fencing to help prevent and mitigate a ton of different incidents that was happening in the community. when there's a crisis in the community, it can easily bleed over into the schools. Having some way of mitigating that is a plus for us in terms of strategy. It is a best practice, but it needs to be done right. Aesthetically, it could be built a lot better. We recognize that this is an area we can improve in, and we are working along with capital projects to do that. And we are looking at going back to Myers and making some corrections in those areas, and other schools to do the same. So thank you for, those are big questions, and we could do better. And when we have an opportunity to do better, we will do better.
Were you doing this all? Yes. Ms. Campbell?
Hey, glad you made it, Chief.
Thank you.
So let me preface my questions with, I'm all for hardening schools, okay, as a safety measure. But as we prepare for budget discussions, I am acutely aware of, every dollar that we're spending, that we talk about. So I saw 4 schools were prioritized, one of which was New Hampstead. How did you decide those schools specifically?
A lot of it is done, I think, at the New Hampstead site. We were addressing some issues in the perimeter on the field, that people were getting access to our facilities, to the fields, the park areas, the tracks. There were some things that were happening back then during those incidents. It could have been injury, it could have been a lot of liability. When our campuses are left wide open, we still have responsibility to it. Typically, on asset protection, we only have a couple of officers that's riding the entire county. That's 7 municipalities, and we have over 62 facilities. And it's very difficult, to patrol all of that. We respond to it. We rely very heavily on our municipality police, but, again, they're patrolling their cities too. Mm-hmm. So perimeter fencing allows us to mitigate as much of that type of traffic and make it more difficult for kids. A lot of areas, schools are places that it attracts people. It's like a magnet. Hey, we got this big school there. There's a track and field. Why can't we go out here and play baseball? Why can't we go run track? I mean, those things could be done if it's coordinated and done in a safe way. But as soon as someone's hurt on that campus, then questions then arises. What could we have done to prevent that? Or if someone's assaulted, I mean, we've had an incident where a dead body showed up on the campus, right? How did that happen? And so all this is just help mitigate it. It is nationally a best practice to have perimeter fencing. It's our first line of defense. It really is part of design. When you design schools, it's included in the original budget, so it's not something that just pops up later. But as Mr. Cashmar would tell you, if we looked at, vestibules, we began working on these projects, still working on it, on a few. But it's something that we know is a best practice, and we try to make schools safer by using those best practices. It came up, I think, in our 2018 or 2019 Parsons study as something that we should be working. So we've been phasing it in since that study came out in order to make our schools safer.
Well, I know for New Hampstead, we've been discussing with the city of Savannah a crosswalk there too, because we've had some real safety concerns. So, okay, so with that in mind, how many schools do we anticipate needing fencing for after the 4 priority schools? Is it all of them? Is it some of them?
No. Some schools are, have perimeter fencing. Some are just going in, shoring up that perimeter fencing over years. Maintenance, make sure that they're, someone hadn't cut the fence or damaged the fence or tree limbs have fallen, to make sure that they're there as a barrier. We're always looking at ways to make sure, as we do renovations, aesthetically, as we improve schools, we want to improve the campus aesthetics, and fencing is a part of that we consider when we start looking at design. So as we relook at schools, as we build new schools, we incorporate that as part of design as we go through that process.
So do we have an estimated cost that we expect this is going to be for even the 4 priority schools, let alone whatever other schools we then
Yeah.
decide?
So I'm going to have to refer back to capital projects. Have we done an assessment on the cost? I know we looked at multiple sites that we want to do improvements on, but do we have a number for that yet?
Not yet.
So that's something that we can get for you.
Okay.
Okay.
And would East Blast, would that be solely East Blast?
I'll have to, now new fencing, yes. Existing fencing, that may have to come out of our operation budget.
Okay.
Some are getting fixed with renovations. Like we're looking at Hubert for a renovation soon, and that's conversations that the project managers have been having with the architects is, you know, what can we do to improve fencing there? So some of it's not just new construction or a sole project, it's renovations covered as well.
Do we anticipate, I know you use the word efficiently, which is great, but do we anticipate needing more manpower to operate the access point as far as letting people in and out? And
No.
Okay.
The good part about the technology, we're looking at technology as it interfaces with existing technology that's already there in the school. You know, monitors, the cameras, so all of it will interface, and we try to do that, you know, make sure they interface as much as we can, so you're only, you know, you're looking at one screen and you can control pretty much everything that, or one dashboard where you can control pretty much everything that technology-wise that will help you keep your school safe.
so y'all have already decided about the coordination with the vestibules that are in place, making sure the technology
Yes.
links up? Okay.
Yeah, in most cases, it'll end up being probably less work for the school staff to manage those fences. Because right now, if you've got a gate or a fence that's closed, they're sending a custodian or a staff member or somebody to go open that fence or that gate for a food delivery, or a student who's, you know, come to school late. And where we're renovating and where we're upgrading, we're adding access control, so it'll all be able to be remotely managed from the front office, just like the front door is.
Okay, I see. Last question. Do we have any guidelines? I see later on in the presentation that we have a set of guidelines now that we're using for building, which I think is excellent. Do we have any guidelines for how we're making fencing decisions?
Yes, so
Okay.
we've included that in the design guidelines, the specifications for that. But remember that everything is, their guidelines. So every campus is different. The application of those guidelines are going to be dependent on design. How much, you know, we could be landlocked. So in some instances, you may not have fencing in the frontage of the school, you know. So we make adjustments based on, you know, design, the landscape, the geographics of what we have to deal with in terms of where the school is. So we have some really good basic design guidelines I think will help move us into the future.
Ms.
Any further
Grabowski?
questions?
Thank you for the update. And I think it is important to be very mindful of fencing in the context of the larger campus. And as we're talking about design guidelines, that we were talking about the design of the fencing in the context of of campus. If we look at some of our older schools, our neighborhood schools, they were built with a very strong sense of civic pride. They are close to the street. They are embedded in the neighborhood, and they are part of the neighborhood. They have a lot of eyes on those campuses, and those neighbors are protective of those schools. That's a good thing.
Absolutely.
We have shifted to a model using a suburban retail model for our school footprints where we shove the building way to the back. We put a big parking lot up in the front, which not only changes the way that the building presents to the broader community, it increases security challenges because you have fewer eyes on the doors. It increases the distance that students have to walk or bike to school. You talked about the crosswalks. I'm all for making sure that our gates are aligned with crosswalks in the proper places. Unfortunately, there are places where that hasn't happened. That has to be a very strategic and thoughtful, coordinated approach with our transportation partners. So I think this is a really healthy conversation. I know one that kind of came out of some of the prior proposed fencing. So I'm really glad that we did hit pause on what we're doing because I think it is critically important that we continue to have schools that reflect a strong sense of community and a place of welcoming, not a place of imprisonment. And I think that's the fine line and the balance that we have to strike. And I fully appreciate that it is not easy to do, but we can use some, if you look at the way a building sits on a lot, the front is the welcoming public space. It's that transition between the public and the private. The back is private. It makes sense to be fenced, but we have to be particularly mindful of where that transition occurs, that we are presenting a place that is inviting and welcoming to our community and to our students, while also making sure that we're maintaining the safety. So I look forward to seeing how this conversation continues, particularly how the fencing and the site designs are integrated in the design guidelines. Thank you.
I appreciate the dialogue. That is a driver for us. Comprehensively, when you look at fencing and how we build and construct schools in neighborhoods, often we have a brand new school in a neighborhood that doesn't have the infrastructure to support our kids. They're dated. We don't have sidewalks. We see neighborhoods where kids are walking with, in the middle of the, not in the middle of the street, on the side of the street with motorists. So some of the infrastructure stuff needs to be addressed. Holistically, comprehensively, when we look at this stuff, we want to make sure we invite everybody to the table. When we have a vision to build a school, to make sure we have the infrastructure there. And that adds to the security as well. Lighting, street lighting, making sure we have the appropriate crosswalks with lights and things of that nature. So those are things that we are partnering with our municipalities with. I thought we did a pretty good job at Groves, just overall addressing that issue. Didn't have all the outcomes that I wanted, but we took a situation and I felt we made the very, very best of it. And I think we have a great outcome and great design of a school.
Ms. Hall?
Johnson High School is a very good example, Denise, of a school that's part of the community, and I'm eagerly looking to see what the design is going to look like for that. It's certainly going to be easier with new schools to incorporate this fencing into the original design of the school. It won't be as hard as retrofitting our older schools. So I imagine we'll have some very creative, beautiful designs to look at. But in terms of the schools, we have to go back and, like you said, Hubert.
Yeah.
That, to me, that's a challenge. I'll be looking forward to see how that's done. But again, Jenkins, that's one that's really pushed far back, but because of the palms and all, it softens it. Mm-hmm. I hope that is in no way destroyed. So the design professional is very, very important in this whole project.
Absolutely. Thank you for your comments.
One comment on funding. Every East Blost had a line item for site improvements. The last 3 East Blosts have unallocated, so we can be creative in terms of new spending for E5 on new schools and retrofitting older schools.
Absolutely.
Every school in this district was in one of the last East Blosts. So there's some creative ways to fund outside of our general fund. All right.
I think they agree. They agree.
Right, Larry? I'm sorry, Mr. Jackson? All right, moving on to capital projects, program schedules. Thank you, gentlemen, for the fencing update.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I have 10 slides of program schedules that we're not going to go through in detail. We'll hit some of these, obviously, as we go through the projects, and I think you have larger copies of those so that you can take them and look at them and be able to read them better. But, as we go through this program, be it Program 4, getting into Program 5, even have, finishing up on Program 3, we do need to have a roadmap on how we're going to go through this. And that's what this is. This program schedule is our roadmap. And we continue to refine it. So when you get updates to it, there'll be changes to it. There'll be additional activities that will be added to it. But it is important for us that we have a map on how we're going to finish E4, go into E5. And this is built primarily on budget, on cost. How much dollars do we have available to take these projects on, and in what order? Obviously, you can't do everything all at one time. We just don't have the funds for that because these are 5-year funded projects. And so that's one of the primary emphasis, but the other one is resources. Some of these projects require swing space. We have to make sure that we have that swing space available, so they get kind of lined up. This one's done, that one can move into it. And also resources, not only just as far as internal resources are concerned, but external. You know, we have a pool of contractors, of vendors, and we want to make sure that we space things out properly so that we can get our best cost associated with the project. So with that, we're certainly going to hit the highlights of the projects that we are currently doing.
Before we get into that, anybody have questions on the schedule? I do. Sorry.
Okay.
So I know it's based on cash flow, but it also based on staff and board collective prioritization of some projects as well, right? It's a mix. I commented on this earlier. There's a few things not in here, like one of the things we've listed in past eSPLOSTs are smaller projects like baseball and softball fields. And then is this comprehensively everything in E5 and E4 carryover, or is this still a work in progress?
It still is a work in progress. And one thing I think you'll note, Mr. Keshmar, when we are able to identify those projects that are related to site improvements, roofs, HVACs, you know, those start out as lump sum dollar amounts. And when you look at the schedule, you'll see on those activities just one big, long activity. However, on the earlier pages of the schedule, when we're able to identify a schedule that's a site improvement schedule or an HVAC or a roof, you'll see those schools get pulled out, separate schedules will get developed for those. So yes, as we do put these together and we do identify a project, we do put it on the program schedule.
And some of these schedules seem unusually long to me. Like 2.5 years to build a high school, 3 years to build athletic fields.
No, the 2.5 years isn't really all that far out if you look at how Groves, the schedule for that, schedule for Windsor Forest that we have right now. And you're looking at West Chatham, I assume.
Yeah.
And so, number one, we don't even have a designer for that one yet, let alone a CMR, so that we can get better refined as far as the schedule is concerned. Because the schedule is going to be dependent a lot upon the layout of that facility too. You know, what can keep, what has to go, how these new buildings are going to fit in. And so when you look at that one, it's a whole lot more, you know, program related. We know we need to do a new high school, we need to do a new K-8, and we need to do an athletic facility. And so we at this point just have our best approach for it, but it certainly will be refined and detailed as we start bringing our consultants on board and can do that.
Okay, well, let me instead of making a declarative statement, let me ask the question. We're being conservative in our timelining and our scheduling in terms of time. I get that. We're not slow playing it to stretch cash flow across multiple projects, right? Because we have more projects in E5, but they're a lot smaller, but we have
Yeah.
more quantity. And what I want to make sure is we're not starting 30, but they're all going to take twice as long as they normally would. What we've done in the past E-Splosts is only start projects we knew we had cash flow to complete.
Exactly.
And we're still taking that approach.
Exactly.
Okay,
And-
that's
and,
what I
you
was.
know, cash flow obviously is important, and I think we could look back at from 2 to 3 to 4. You know, at 3, I think it was, we held some projects back because we weren't quite sure about the proceeds, particularly when COVID hit. So, you know, we have that kind of flexibility in the schedule, and that's one thing good about a program schedule is you can move things around. But yeah, our approach is going to be we make sure we have the dollars so that we can finish a project. And then, cost-wise, it's best for us to be as efficient as possible with that schedule because that's going to get us our best price. So nobody wants to, you know, spend 4 years on a project that should take 2 years to do.
And is there an opportunity here to look holistically at our projects and like advance purchase 5 trillion tons of steel or, you know, 1 billion tons of concrete or 10 miles of fencing that we need in 7 locations instead of doing it school by school?
I think it's worth the research. You think about having different contractors associated with all of these, so it would have to be one big massive owner purchased, and how all that would get worked out. You know, there's a lot of things that I think are good maybe to take a look at. I think maybe like, you know, we talked about before, as far as with athletic fields, maybe bulk purchasing more of those. And we did do a lot of bulk purchasing, particularly with FF&E, if you remember right, in
Yeah.
E2.
Well, let's
And so I
extrapolate.
think we
That's all I'm
certainly
asking.
want to continue to look at that as a good way for cost savings, yes.
Ms. Hall?
I don't want to panic, so I'm going to ask Ms. Davidson. I'm looking for baseball and softball play-ready Savannah High, and I don't see it anywhere. So I know that you've been helping me with that. I just want to know where it is that I haven't seen it.
Yeah, that one, ma'am.
And pages, the more
no.
I panic.
No, ma'am, that particular school has not been
See, there's no-
pulled out and separated and put on a schedule, but we certainly will do that. We're just putting together our consultants in order to do that project, so we will pull that one out. We understand that is a priority.
Dr. Watts, you don't want me camping out at Hopkins Street? Okay. Okay, all right, all right.
The next time you see it, we will have it, and it will be on there before you even see it.
Okay, I'm getting a lot of community pressure exerted on me. You know, I'm not just complaining to
Yeah,
complain.
I understand. I understand.
Ms. Campbell and then Ms. Grabowski.
So that kind of goes along with what Ms. Hall said. I was looking for Savannah High. I see HVAC on here, but we haven't put it on the schedule yet for a time frame as far as, you know, the lease with Georgia Tech and how quickly we're going to be ready.
It's on there, yes, ma'am.
Where is it? I don't see
It's
it.
after STEM Academy, Rice Creek Academic Center, Savannah High School renovation.
3rd page from the back.
Appreciate it.
Sorry.
Line 282.
Yes, okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Ms. Grabowski?
I'm going to stick up for my friends at Massey. I see that they are at the end of the list. I know somebody has to be at the end of the list, but I believe they are also having some issues with potential water intrusion and windows. So the longer we put that off, the worse it's going to get. So if there is a way to be able to address some of those issues that are only going to be 5 times more expensive if we wait 5 years, I think that would be fiscally responsible and prudent to be able to do that if that assessment can happen. And potentially that piece is, carved off and it's a separate little sub-project or something, but that those issues, I think, need to be addressed sooner,
Yes,
if
ma'am.
possible.
And that project has been on,
They've been waiting
I
for a
think,
really, really long
and it's
time.
been kind of pushed around, and so if there is one that we can bring up, we certainly will look at that.
Okay. I feel like, it's not a school like our other schools, so it's easy to kind of get forgotten, so
But,
I'll be a
yeah,
cheerleader.
It is historic, and we need to make sure that we take care of that.
Thank you.
All right, project updates.
Okay. For DEH, the CTAE building and the completion of those athletic fields, everything's coming along well. And all of these projects are going to be completed and ready for school. The CTAE building, taking that old black box and just converting it into a nice CTA space. That's coming along very well. They're in final punch list right now. Same thing with the athletic complex. On the right side, you can see the baseball, softball fields, the soccer or the multi-purpose field. There's a parking lot just beyond that tennis court that has to get put in. They were hoping to get that paved this week, but looks like the rain that we got kind of postponed that a little bit, so that's scheduled in for next week. But that will be an important feature of getting this part of it done. The other part of it, as you can see, the main field is in, working on the track, and those all the buildings are all getting ready also and ready for the first football game. Windsor Forest High.
Ms. Hall?
Mr. Huttinger, this comment isn't really for you, it's more for Chief Enoch and Dr. Watts. I've been hearing, I don't know for a fact, but I've been hearing that maybe 5% of the students at Groves are not being respectful of all of this money and effort that we have put into these buildings. And they're doing things like dismantling things in the bathroom and trying to flush them down the toilets, that kind of thing. So I'm thinking, we're talking about fencing in the outer perimeter, but I think school leadership needs to, I believe in hall monitors. If you're out of the classroom, I want, why are you out of the classroom? And for how long? You know what I'm saying? Because it doesn't make sense for us to spend these millions of dollars. And like I said, it's just a small amount, but those students can destroy the morale of the other children if they're in there being destructive. So I just wanted to bring that up while we're on it, because I had heard that was happening. I don't know, Mr. Huttinger, if that's reached your ears of any plumbing issues and things at Groves because of miscreants hurting our
Yes,
buildings.
we understand there's been some plugs in the sanitary lines, yes. All right, so Windsor Forest High, we talked about this before as far as the schedule with completing the new building, getting the students moved over, and then demolishing the old building. We will keep that temporary parking lot open in order to have the students and staff use that once a new building is opened. And you can see from the pictures again where the new facility is coming along very, very nicely in there. So we've got furniture all scheduled for that facility and ready to start moving that in this summer, getting into a punch list, and ready for the ribbon cutting, scheduled for July 31. And some interior pictures, as you can see, just pretty much in finishes. Bloomingdale, same situation as far as interior is concerned. as Windsor Forest, a lot of work on the exterior. And of course, if you've been wishing for rain, please stop. You know, we don't need any more rain out there. Hopefully, we can get things dried up, but that contractor is expecting to have that site pretty much completed in the next 2 weeks, and the interior obviously is coming along nicely again. Scheduled for a ribbon cutting on August 1. And you can see again the interior pictures. Got some asphalt going on. J.G. Smith, this project is ready to get started just as soon as we can get the kids out of there, school's over, moved out. We did have a meeting with the community on Monday, May 5. And the construction manager talked about how he's going to build this building and making sure that the neighbors are comfortable with what's going to be happening, alerting them and keeping them aware. And we'll continue to do that as that project goes on so that they're not surprised. They're very aware of things that are going to be happening. Montgomery, meanwhile, is getting finished up and getting prepared for J.G. Smith to swing and move over there. And this is the new J.G. Smith. You can see the new cafeteria. And in a whole new entry area, difficult maybe to see there, but you see in the red, admin media center, a large plan there. That front entry is going to basically be torn out, and a whole new entry is getting put back in there. Other than that, lots of finishes, you know, flooring, ceilings, all new HVAC, and all new wall finishes. So it will be a pretty beautiful new building when it's completed. Georgetown, same situation, getting them ready to move to Largo Tibet. Largo Tibet is in the process of coming together now, getting ready for them. And this project, of course, is a new gymnasium. That's a main part of this project, is a new gymnasium. You can see the plan. You can see where it's going to be located, basically where the old one was. Demolish the old building, the old gymnasium, put the new one in there. It ties into the front office area. And the other part of this project that's a large part of it is a roof, new roof. And that's a big metal roof, as you well know. So that's going to be a big part. And the rest of it is just all of those interiors, finishes, casework, and just cleaning up that facility. We are working hard on getting a GMP change order ready for June board that we'll have to you in June, and that's going to provide the dollars that are necessary for J.E. Dunn to do the demolition work, to order his materials like steel, other long lead items, in order to keep this project on schedule. The old Mercer building, we looked at this one quite extensively previously, again, but it's in design, and we are looking to have this project ready and get it out for bid in September, bidding in October, so get a contractor in there in November, early December, and get started and really have the goal to try to have this one ready by the end of by 26. And the Early Learning Center at Henderson Formey, there's a ribbon cutting on July 30. This is our first one. As you know, this building had been going through renovations all year as the students have been out at the Schumann site. So it's finishing up beautifully. In final punch lists, inspections, furniture, in fact, is going in there right now. I think that's going to be pretty much completed by the end of the week. And so we're ready for the students to come back and to have the ribbon cutting. Hubert, another project that's going to have mostly renovation work inside the building, all new finishes, ceilings, lighting, One of the other big projects in here is going to be putting in a new gym floor. I'd like to put a wood floor in there, but we're looking at other surfaces possibly. But as you can see, there really isn't any major, there's no demolition or major rebuild. It's pretty much just all working the existing. On the right side is the CTA area, and those areas are going to have some more extensive work done in order to have some better spaces there. But you can see the type of work that is going to be completed. And we talked about this, may have shown some pictures of this before, in the courtyards. In between those classroom wings, there's going to be a lot of work done to make those courtyards outdoor teaching spaces. And so you can see that as that gets developed.
Mr. Moss?
On the HVACs, I don't, when are we doing, and I don't see any of them, when are we doing any work on the charter schools?
And I'm sorry,
Any work on the charter schools that are in East Wast?
the charter schools.
Yes.
I just was inquiring about that with my team, because I knew the question would be asked. If not by somebody on the board, I certainly have an email in my inbox before I left for work today. And the response I got is that we have not deprioritized them. We are working on a separate timeline. We're waiting on some documents and information from those campuses to determine how they fit within our larger schedule. But just because you don't see them, and I know what appearance that may give, so I want to publicly acknowledge that you do not see them in here, but don't let that shape a perception around them being deprioritized. Similar to Savannah High School. They have not been overlooked. We are just working on a different plan for them. So that's another one that you have my commitment on. And my firstborn child, if you need them.
So they would be on a different
Yes,
path than
it does,
ours.
but to the public that sees this, or to somebody who may be at a charter school, it could send a different message.
On that, are we doing the work, or are we just giving them the money?
Now, I will
and they're doing it?
I will defer to the team to answer specifics.
I thought we were just providing funding.
Our plan is just to provide the funding, but to keep them in the prioritization schedule, we've asked for example, if they ask for HVAC, we ask for support on where their HVAC is currently so that we can compare that to our other schools and make sure we are equally treating all schools at the same prioritization.
Got it. Thank you.
They are not forgotten.
Ms. Grabowski?
Are we doing questions now, or are you finished?
Was it related?
It wasn't about HVAC or charters. It was about some of the other things. So I'll wait.
It's your decision. You can do whatever the heck you want.
All right, well, we're at Hubert, so I will ask a couple questions about Hubert. I've been aware of the outdoor learning spaces and thrilled to death, so cannot wait to see those, and I hope that is something we'll see at all of our schools moving forward. So thank you to the team for including that. The value is tremendous. The gym floor, Mr. Huddingham, you mentioned that you're looking at different alternatives. It was my understanding, because I had asked about a middle school floor previous, not about Hubert, that wood floors were what we are typically used, or is what's in our requirements for middle schools. Is that correct?
There are alternate floors also. There is different types of a sports floor that also would be allowable for that. The issue, and we'd love to put wood in there, but normally, and you know this, when you put a wood floor in a facility, you have to recess the concrete. And so that concrete is not recessed.
Okay,
because there's just
so
a
it's
vinyl
because it's a
on there right
renovation.
now,
It is
right.
site-specific for Huber
Okay.
on why they're not getting wood flooring.
Okay, okay.
So, options, tear the concrete out and re-pour it with a recess, probably not the best option. Or we're looking at other ways to handle it.
Okay.
I'd certainly like to hope that we could find it, but those floors are, what, 2.5 inches higher than what the
Yeah, no,
existing
that
concrete
makes
is, so.
complete sense. And I think that's a really good example of where our design guidelines have to be like different for new builds versus renovations, which I know is something that we've talked about a good bit. And then just a kudos to the team and a thank you for the meeting at Jacob G. Smith. I think it went very well. I think the community really appreciated the opportunity to be at the school, to see what was coming, and also to understand the potential construction impacts. So really appreciate the work that went into that, and having everyone of the team present, the contractor and the designer there. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Gamble Road. Of course, the key here is to develop more parking for buses. A new transportation toilet facilities are so key. That old facility needs to be replaced. So that's one of the first phases on this, is to get that going, and then to get the new fueling station in and work off into the maintenance building and do whatever renovation works that we can do there too. So this is a phased project, and just working on starting to get into the design of the office and restroom facility. Garden City, you just awarded a contract to the architect, SSO&E Group. So design is just starting. We're looking at doing the same types of things as far as interior renovations are concerned. Finishes, flooring, ceilings, window replacements, always done in these facilities. Casework normally gets pretty beat up by this time, and so that gets replaced. And another thing that's important in this particular school is to put in a security vestibule. And we also want to take a look at this site parking. Right now, when you drive in from the left side, you kind of just have a dead end. You just kind of go around a circle and you go back out again. So we want to see what we can do to improve that area out in the front and have better vehicle access through there, maybe even provide a little bit more parking. But we are finding that there are wetlands in there. And so now we got to kind of work around that. And so that's all part of this process of getting into the design. But we're certainly looking to have this bid in the spring of next year, and then J.G. Smith will be leaving Montgomery in 26, and we'd like to put Garden City in there and do their renovation work through 26 and 27. At the Islands Athletic Complex, we are putting on new team rooms. You see across the top there where there's a home team room on the right side. On the bottom is a visitors team room and additional bathrooms. There's expanded seating on the visitor side and expanded seating on the home side with a much larger press box. We're out to bid on this project right now. We had a pre-bid. We had some great response in our pre-bid, so we're really encouraged by that. And this project is going to require some phasing. We met with athletics and told them that we will have the visitors and the home side available for the football season. We're not going to be touching any of the bleacher work at all. Make sure that they have that available for football. And then after football is completed, then we'll work on expanding the visitors' bleachers and target to have that ready for the soccer season. Of course, they'll be able to get started up on the home side too, but that will probably go a little further into the season. But there's a lot of area in the existing bleachers that we are not touching. And so we're very hopeful that we can get that kind of partitioned off and still use that for seating for the 26 soccer track season. And of course, the entire facility will be ready for football next year in the 26 season.
I would talk to not just athletics, but security and the school too, because a lot of times they make everybody sit on one side anyway. So you could put everybody on one side, do the work on the other, and then switch it around.
Yeah. We met with them, in particular at football, I think they wanted to keep it separate, but the other ones definitely, and that will help a lot too, yes.
Right.
Yeah, because even access around the facility is difficult. We've got to come in around that, where that storage shack is located now, and we can't cut down any trees around Whitmarsh to bring an extension off there, so we got to get access behind that facility, so that's what all has to get worked out with the contractor. And other project updates, Pulaski, of course, completing that front drive. There's Georgia Power needs to relocate some wiring in order for us to do that work. The modular classrooms, you just awarded that last month, so we're working with Mobile Modular to finalize the schedule to get those out there also and get those ready. Garrison, working through that vestibule project. And we also need to replace, at Garrison, we need to replace those front entry, those vestibule windows, those big, large windows. They are not in good shape. And so we will be having a change order coming out shortly to replace those also. And Savannah Arts, we had a pre-construction meeting actually with the contractor. He's out there actually working. They're doing some work in the upstairs, starting to clean up that balcony, doing some painting and things like that. The wood flooring is going to get pulled out I think in about 2 weeks they'll get started. And we did hook them up with Reclaim, is that what it is? I'm sorry, that Repurpose. So they're going to be able to work with a demo contractor and be able to salvage as much as what they can.
So for my colleagues, that's a big deal. And I think for the community, that's a big deal. It's deconstruction versus demolition, which appreciates the value of these historic materials, and it's a much more sustainable practice. Instead of those materials going to the landfill, they can now be reused, and their historic value can be appreciated, and it tells a story. And so I'm really grateful to hear that we are able to make that part. I hope that's something that we can look to do more of in the future, not only with our historic buildings, but also as a way to divert waste from the landfill. It's really a much more responsible way to undergo, especially when we're doing these major projects and we think about how much of that goes to landfill. But I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you.
And in our roof replacement projects, Gould, we're getting that contract together so they can get started with that work. Johnson in Design in Georgetown will be done by J.E. Dunn when we're doing the renovation work. HVAC, Woodville Tompkins will be the next project that will be put out for bid. Islands High School is out for bid right now, the replacement of that entire HVAC system. And Savannah High, working through completing the phase 3 of that project. Backup generators are being installed, excuse me. And there's another phase 3, that we would want to get a design contract also approved in June, so that we can keep those schools, get the rest of those schools done and get those emergency generators done. Site and perimeter fencing projects, again, this also is out for bid, and these are the 4 projects that we talked about. And so based upon that previous discussion, we will see if there needs to be any addendums that we can get out. Otherwise, we want to get these things out and awarded. Port Wentworth, the auxiliary facility contract was just issued again last month for those projects and the central hallways, the wings, and right now we're designing the garage area, which will be the old gymnasium, in order to turn that into a facility for Campus Place. And then our updated budget. Last month at board, there were quite a number of budget amendments and budget transfers that were done. And when the dust settles, this is what it's going to look like. So the projects you can see that have dollars associated with them are the ones that we're able to do in E4, and many of the other ones have been pushed back into E5. And again, these projects that are getting pushed back, we are going to be doing an expanded scope on these projects. As we found out in E4, I'm sorry, in E5, as we found out in E4, we just can't throw $3 million at an old building and say, let's just do what we can do with it. Because we get in there and we find out that we have more issues and we may as well do this and clean this up and do that. And so these projects are becoming much larger, more complex than what initially they were going to be. So when we push them over to 5, yes, we're going to be doing some major work in them. And then there's other ones that are going to have some repurposing. Either there'll be a new facility, or in the case of one of the facilities, it will no longer become a school. So the key to this entire thing, however, is that area in the blue. It's proceeds. You can only do as many projects as dollars that you have. So once we were able to develop and determine what those proceeds were going to be, what our SPLOST, the TAVIT, and that was all dependent upon, again, you know, the collections and having a shorter period. The TAVIT, or I'm sorry, the interest, which we can extend out, and state capital outlay that we continue to keep chipping at. So we're projecting $481,300,000 as the E4 budget, and you can see how those dollars are going to be allocated. And you can take this and you can align it with the schedule that we gave you. As far as the E5 projects are concerned, just starting to get into these, obviously the big one is the West Chatham High School. And one thing that we have to get resolved as quickly as what we can is how much buildable area do we really have out on that site. And in order to do that, you have to do a wetland delineation report. And this is kind of the primary look at what has so far been determined. And we're getting out, we have the vendor going back out there now and refining this. But you can see where all of those red dots are, everything that's north of those, that whole area up there, it's all wooded, but it's also all wetland. And there's a large little patch area there. It actually is about maybe 3-4 acres, I believe, that also has been delineated at this point, and they're getting hopefully a little better idea of that as they go through a further delineations. But that is an area that we certainly would like to capture. We realize we can't capture this entire site. There's 100+ acres. In order to do what we want to do, 60 acres, look at Groves, that's like 40-some acres, I think, total. So if we're doing 2 facilities and the athletic facilities, you know, I think we can capture probably a good 60 acres of that. So we'll continue to want to push that line up as far as what we can, capture as much as we can, but we certainly have to look hard at what we're going to need to be able to do in order to mitigate that wetland area, and whether that's credits or however that may be done. However, again, there's an opportunity here too to use that for teaching area and to maybe kind of keep a little wetland area in there. So I think that's all the kinds of things that we're looking at right now. The next major thing is to get our design professional on board. We have been drafting and putting together the RFP for that. It's going to be a very complex process, to be honest with you, as far as getting responses back for an RFQ, for just get the qualifications, shortlist that and then go out and actually get proposals, do interviews, and I'm sure, as you can know, that this is going to be a very important design professional assignment. And so we want to get started. We need to get this out. We're working hard to do that in the next week or two in order to get this out. We have a new purchasing software that's being used, site that's being used, Bonfire, and we are just, we have a couple of projects out on it right now. We haven't gone through a bid with it yet, but that's all being done in the next couple of weeks too. So that's one thing that we're really working hard on right now. And the other one, of course, is Bull Street. That asbestos survey has been completed. We had somebody go through there and walk that facility and take the tests, and so we have our survey completed. We know what needs to be abated. And of course, you can't do any of that until the building is empty. And so you had heard before the plan as far as the relocation, get that building emptied out so that we can get in there and do the abatement work. And then, of course, that one also is on the schedule as far as the design professional, and lots of considerations, obviously, as far as historic and how all of that is going to relate to what our design is going to be. So there's studies, there's groups that are being put together to do that. Our East Blos 5 budget, and again, same concept, I think. You can only spend what you bring in. And so the first thing that needed to be done was to look at what our potential proceeds are going to be in SPLOST, TAVIT, interest, and we also have a fund balance transfer. So there's $821,206,000, and you can see how those projects, how those dollars initially have been allocated, the projects that were brought over from E4 and the new projects, and you've seen this list before, and when you see that first comprehensive summary that comes out in E5, this is pretty much what it is going to say.
And we want to point out to our charter friends that they are on that slide.
Before we get into design guidelines, any questions for Mr. Huddinga? Ms. Grabowski?
Real quickly, on the West Chatham update, I know how hard the team looked at sites, and this is where we ended up. I remain very concerned about the limited access to this, and so as we're looking at crafting the RFP, I hope we will raise that as something that needs to be very closely looked at in design, site circulation for vehicles, buses, et cetera, even more so than we do at some of our other schools. Also, I hear you on the wetlands. I know it is a challenge, but I would also encourage us to think creatively. Just because we might get a permit or be able to mitigate doesn't mean it's a good place to build. The soils don't change, the hydrology doesn't change. We know the problems that have happened when we have tried to build in areas that are naturally wet. We cannot fight Mother Nature. So I would really encourage us to respect what the land wants to be. Look at going up. We have a lot of ways to tighten up this site. Again, this is a very sprawling site. I know we can take some creative design solutions, but I would just really caution us to not try and fight Mother Nature too hard, because in the end, we're going to lose.
And let me,
Savannah High baseball field's a good example, right?
Yes.
let me, one thing I failed to say too, when I had that slide up, the city is going to be doing major construction work on those roadways, and we've been sent some preliminary drawings and show how, that's going to be able to help the school project at those entrances. And we certainly will be able to have some input into that as far as some drives too.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Mayor Williams. She's been on this with the traffic study as well from the beginning. So she's been working diligently to make sure the city's taking care of and the students.
So we got one way in and one way out, and that fundamentally is a challenge.
All right, Sunny.
Public transport. Before, Ms. Hall?
Mr. Heidinger, you've been with us a long time, and I've been hearing that your departure is not imminent, but coming. And I just want you to know how much we appreciate how you have guided us through so many of these projects over the years. I'm not sure exactly what your plans are, but I just want you to know how much you are appreciated.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Sorry, one comment, and this not necessarily to Mr. Huttinger, but as we get into E5, we've got a more robust communications department. We've become a lot more sophisticated. We know what's coming now. We're on our 5th East Blast. And I think once we have a firmer project schedule on certain projects, we should consider putting together a little blurb that we can send to schools that they can include in their weekly newsletters, however they communicate. Because I frequently get questions, when's our stuff happening? What's the schedule? And then on other projects, like, I'm just going to use Islands, for example, I get 10 texts a day when the HVAC doesn't work. And I'm like, here's Dr. Watt's personal cell number. But rightly so, and if we sent out I think we did it with Marsh Point a couple of years ago when the tornado hit, and we sent out a communication to the school saying, all right, we've assessed it, here's the schedule, and everybody's like, okay, cool, thank you. But we told them, and we told them again, and it may be, we always, when East Blast comes up, we always talk about how we can't do a PR campaign, and so all we can do is tell people about the stuff we've done, and they can make a decision. But if we're telling them all along, all right, here's the budget for this project, here's the schedule, and we ask the schools to distribute it in their weekly communications, we're telling them again, and we're being proactive. But it's just something for us to think about now that we're a mature East Blast consumer. I think it would be helpful.
I 110% agree. I very much believe, as a former school leader, that the number one source of information for a school community is the school leader and the teachers. And we have to do a better job in our district of cascading. I probably use that word 800 times a week. My team is probably sick of hearing it. But we have to do a better job of empowering our school leaders with the information that they need, because it perpetuates a us and them mentality. When they get a question about East Blast or a problem, it's the district's fault or it's the district's responsibility. And the more we can provide our principals with information, the better that partnership is. And so they have ownership in how they communicate. So I am 100% on board. That is my vision. I would love to drive more people to the school websites and to the schools for questions and answers. And that's something we'll be working on. So your feedback is valid and well taken.
Thank you. Design guidelines.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
First of all, let me thank you for all the feedback we get from you too. So it makes us better. So for design guidelines, I'm going to introduce one of my co-workers, Dr. David Scott, who has been leading this project on design guidelines, and he'll give you a walk through the next few slides.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you here today. With regard to the design guidelines, we have been working on these for the last year or so in earnest. They're obviously a living document, and we'll talk about that. But we've been putting effort in over the last year to try to really bring them up to the standards that we'd like to see. With those documents, I know that Ms. Annette Wynn was a primary driver on this, and want to make sure that she's recognized for the effort that she put in for the district in order to do this. We started with what our goalposts are. Why do we have design guidelines? How do we apply them? What level do we want the design guidelines to be applicable for? And who do we want to get input from in order to make sure that they represent what we need in this district. And so as you see, they're our purpose. The guidelines really are a resource. They're not a Bible. They're not a traditional design guideline like ACI 318 designed for the construction of reinforced concrete members or the IBC International Building Code. They're a resource, and they should be a resource that is accessible for multiple audiences. They're not just for design professionals or technical professionals. They should be for contractors, vendors, stakeholders, other departments within the district. Everyone should be able to access these guidelines, and I don't just mean physically access, I mean able to understand what we're trying to do, and that will allow them to provide input on what we need to do to make them better. The idea is for these design guidelines for new construction, additions, renovations, and modifications should incorporate these design guidelines all the way from conception through completion. The idea of creating separate guidelines for different projects is something that can certainly, has merits, but we also want to be careful that we don't have information in one set of guidelines that is not applicable in another set of guidelines so that there's confusion. So we want to make sure we do that. Rigor, obviously, we start with the Georgia Department of Education, and then you also have all basic codes and standards are going to be part of any set of design guidelines that we have. And finally, the most important part, in my opinion, is that we have a stakeholder focus. We're in a coastal environment. We are in an environment that stretches between urban, suburban, and, again, coastal waterfront properties and areas. That is a very unique and distinct set of locations for our academic facilities. And so we need to have input from many different stakeholders and department. Much of the information that's provided is based on local experience, things that work well here, and they're related to best practices because we want our projects to be completed successfully. Again, the goal is to build sustainable and resilient educational infrastructure. So one of the things that whenever I was asked to take an active role in this process was to make sure that there was an understanding that our design professionals would comply with our design guidelines. It's a two-phase process. First, get our design guidelines up to snuff. Second is to take those design guidelines and ensure that they are being used, because if they're sitting on the shelf, they're not good for anybody. So now, as part of our design guidelines, we have a certification of compliance, which was developed for that, and we will expect all of our design professionals to adhere to those guidelines. The guidelines that we currently have is version 3.0. Again, these were compiled in January of 2025. I want, again, to make sure I give credit to Ms. Annette Wynn, recently retired, who did a majority, her and her group, let me say, did a majority of the heavy lifting on this. There was input, significant input, as you might expect, from capital projects, maintenance, procurement, many other departments, nursing, police, a variety of other places have provided input for the current set of guidelines. We did add some new divisions to this, Divisions 3 and Division 4. We still don't have every division of the CSI master format, but we have many of those. And there were a couple of divisions that were substantially revised: thermal and moisture protection, or roofs, as we call them, as well as communications, given the changes and updates that are occurring there. So those divisions were substantially changed. This is a living document, so revisions are in progress, right? We have things that we need to do, and we need to continue to update. One example is Division 8 openings related to doors, et cetera. Recent Bloomingdale Elementary School, we had a cost of work adjustment where we had new information provided, not new, but we had updated information provided by our maintenance department on differences in lock hardware, strike plates, things like that. Those requirements are now, we're assessing how applicable they are across all of our different types of schools and incorporating them into the design guides. As our different departments come up with better ways to do things, we need to make sure that we capture that information for our design professionals. As you heard today, I don't think there's any need for me to review the new information that we're developing on fences and gates, exterior improvements, Division 32. We're obviously actively involved in that right now, and we're soliciting and gaining input from our stakeholders, which certainly includes the police department. It also includes our community leaders, et cetera. So that's what we're doing. That's our set of guidelines, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Ms. Grabowski.
As we were making these updates, a couple of questions. How have we incorporated, I hear you talk about the different departments, and the doors make me think of, I know before when design guidelines were updated, the security hardware that was selected didn't work well for our teachers. So how are we incorporating feedback from our school users primarily, and then also, Ms. Davidson, I know you and I have had some conversations about kind of taking this out to the broader design community. I think we can learn a lot from those who have used it, so any updates on that process?
With the current guidelines, we had input from a variety of outside design professionals, including Doolahary and Wheats, who is heavily involved in our HVAC and some of our electrical updates. We also had input from LS3P, who is the primary design professional on the DEH complex, as well as Hussey Gay Bell, which was in Windsor, primary driver on the Windsor Forest. So we are actively seeking that information, and we plan to have a stakeholder working group of area design professionals to review the design guidelines periodically, to provide input, to make sure that we are capturing what they want. The other thing that I would like to see from our area design professionals is an evaluation of when we are in any way, shape, or form limiting the ability to respond to challenges at specific sites. You talked about sustainability, for example. If we wanted to have a facility where we wanted to look at non-traditional reinforcement for concrete structures in coastal environments, like, say, bamboo, we have an access area for that. We don't want to have our design guidelines so rigid that we can't accommodate those kinds of things. As far as input from the teachers in the school system, we regularly get feedback on that, and we regularly incorporate it. For example, at the recent track and field update and practice field update at New Hampstead High School, I was asked to get involved in that, and walking with the athletic directors and the athletic personnel out there, as well as the district athletic director, Mr. Sanders, there was a lot of discussion about how most of the damage to the track occurs when the football team goes back and forth across it in cleats.
Right.
It's a practical thing. So now the design guidelines will state when we're putting in new practice facilities, we will be incorporating crossing mats. We will make purchasing crossing mats part of our new our design guidelines going forward. So when you put in a new track facility, or you put in any track facility that has an internal field, you provide crossing mats for those locations. So the feedback is both formal and informal, but we are working diligently to incorporate it.
Can I ask, sorry, a more specific question too about, so some of our academic, like I think about like band, dance, chorus, the arts, like they have very specific needs. Have we sent those sections to, and I would hope that we would have the opportunity for all, I mean, I know we can ask a couple of teachers, but I would hope we would open up that opportunity broader than just handpicking a couple of folks. Have we had that kind of feedback?
So I did send the design guidelines to Ms. Graham as her role, but we're happy to have feedback. And just as an example of how it's a fluid document, when we met with the Hubert academic teams, we spoke about the band request to not have carpet flooring.
Right.
Because of the
That was something I had raised previously as well.
And so we amended the guidelines to make sure that it had the flooring that not only accommodated the acoustics, but also limited the human saliva that came from students playing band instruments. So, but we welcome others to provide feedback, and if you have
I
individuals.
think we have to be intentional in asking. We can't dump a huge document like this in the lap of a band director, say, give us feedback.
Yeah, they're not.
We need to say, this is the section about the band. Please give us specific, like, we have to put ourselves in their shoes, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ms. Davis, but we have to be intentional and really want the feedback, and I think that wanting that feedback shows in the way in which we communicate asking for it. So I just want to make sure we're being very intentional and thoughtful in the way that we are asking for that
I
feedback.
think there are possibly two approaches. I think there is a space for feedback in the guidelines. My priority would be when we actually get to that school site and we design for that school site, that's really when we want to have that feedback given. I don't know how to capture that, but I have heard you loud and clear about this opportunity about getting everyone around the table. So I think there are two places where that has to happen, in the design guidelines, but really once we get to the actual project, because every school is so different.
I will just add, oh, I'm sorry.
So I'll add to that. The next time we're designing auditoriums or a performing arts center, let's consult with acoustic people, and don't consult with acoustic people that are wanting to sell you something. So, and wanting to be in there every time to help you with sound. But seriously, we cannot have Yamaka happen again. That facility could be used so much more if it were designed properly. We would have people, ooh, that's, anyway, but I just, what Ms. Grabowski was saying is, we have experts around. Let's reach out to them before we spend all of this money on these facilities.
So this is like deja vu all over again. We're on East Plus 5. E1, we were learning. E2, we started doing better. We had more comprehensive design guidelines. But at the beginning of every East Plus, or at every other CIC meeting, we have the same conversation. Next time, can we please consult with so-and-so? And why don't we do what we do with our normal policies? There's a 4-year review process. A small subset of them get reviewed every 4 years. Design guidelines, sections 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, they're on a cycle. And every 3 years, we review certain sections and we bring in an expert.
I like that.
A great example of here's what happens. And I'm not degrading anyone, but it's going to sound like I am. When we do a specific project and we add solar panels, we add a greenhouse, we add sports fields, we add an auditorium, the design professional says, sure, we can do that. I got somebody who can do that. And sometimes they do. Sometimes it's somebody who worked on something 6 years ago and they have limited knowledge, but they want to keep the work, or they think they can consult. And so there's a tension there. And the question is, how rigidly do we articulate what we want in our design guidelines and make them accountable for it? So let's go through a periodic review of our guidelines. Let's just put it on a schedule. Every 3 years, Teacher Senate reviews this academic section. Great example, the music section, Islands High School auditorium was added on. It was beautiful, but they couldn't get half their instruments from the band room onto the stage because somebody said, we need a door there. Nobody said, how big does a door have to be to get drums through there? And if somebody had said to a music teacher, what do we need? And we would have saved $200,000, right? So, but that happens in a big project. But let's be proactive about getting acoustic experts and sound engineers. When we moved from E1 to E2, I pushed hard on the design guidelines because the 2 worst words in the English language are value engineering, mostly, except if you're a budget hawk and you're watching tax dollars. There's a balance there. You guys have heard me say this, I'm still annoyed that we put in drywall at Godley, and within 6 months, the first graders and kindergartners had destroyed it, and we had to replace it. And so I asked the question, why are we putting drywall in there, oh, to save money. Well, why aren't we doing block? Because it's more expensive. So then we started looking at what do our, not articulating you have to use this kind of block or this kind of tile, but as a board, what are our philosophies? What are our policies? And we switched to a philosophy of value engineering. The cheapest product at the quickest price or the quickest schedule should not be the driver. We should start thinking about sustainability and life cycle and all that. And I remember we had a big argument where I'm like, I'm willing to spend more money on travertine or porcelain rather than ceramic if it's going to last 5 times as long and the life cycle cost is less. And other people are like, no, it's cheaper to build it. Let's not spend more money. So I say all that to say this. The design guidelines are a living document, and they should not be restricted. They should allow for some creativity, site adjustment, and specificity. But a portion of them are a reflection of our philosophy and principles, right? And in the past, we have revised the design guidelines, and the board has voted on them. And we've had a lot of changeover in facilities and COO. I want to remind everyone, the board should look at them and vote on them again. At least the front section of the design guidelines should be an expression of the board policy and philosophy. And while I'm okay with giving the architect flexibility on materials and shapes and things like that, when the board has said we want to focus on sustainability, we want to focus on integration with neighborhoods, we want to focus on integration with academic programs. Ms. Hall would always say, oh, we're putting in solar panels. How are we getting the engineers from Jenkins to be involved with figuring that out, or flying the drones, or things like that? But if the board collectively says, here's our building philosophy, we don't believe in value engineering as the bottom line core focus. We want sustainability and life cycle. Those things are non-negotiable. And part of the problem we've had the last 10 years is somebody somewhere thought they were, and so stuff got done that ignored the design guidelines or ignored kind of our policy and philosophy. So I appreciate this attestation document, but it also applies internally, right? We, as a district and a staff, have to say, we're going to follow them too. And there's a balance between a few pages at the front. Here's the expression of board philosophy and policy. We look at life cycle, we look at sustainability. Here are the things we want to incorporate that I don't think should be negotiable. Everything else is at the discretion of you all who are in the weeds building this stuff with our partners. So there's a balance there, and maybe we can articulate that at the beginning. I know Ms. Grabowski was working on, sorry, there's a fly up here, was working on kind of this review process in conjunction with staff. But maybe we do have, here's the board approach and philosophy and principles. Here's our review cycle for these design guidelines, and then the board votes on them, and those are non-negotiable. Everything else is flexible on the materials and timing and measurements and things like that. There's a balance there.
Yep, I love that.
Couldn't agree more. If I could provide just a couple of pieces of input on that regarding the input. I actually had suggested this, and I think Dr. Watts probably remembers that. I think that what we should have is a formal process for input from teachers who occupy a new space 12 months after the facility is open for construction. We should have a formal process where they send that information back, what worked and what didn't work, and you need a little bit of time with that. The second thing I'll say regarding that is that my experience has been that surveys are somewhat limited in the amount of response you get. All of these teachers, I've never met a teacher who said, I am so bored, I have so much time and I have nothing to do with it, right? So my personal experience has been that if we can create some working groups with targeted individuals like the music departments, like the nursing areas, like the STEM facility folks, the engineering folks and all, to find out what works and what doesn't for them. I feel like that my experience is that the feedback that we get in those arenas tends to be more readily applicable and tends to be more encompassing than survey results that people just add to the bottom of the list. So I would say that.
I agree with that. I would say, though, that when you do a working group and require people to come to you, you get people who are passionate about a particular issue sometimes. Another option is part of our design and maybe our CM or GC contract is you will come to that school to a staff meeting 6 months after, and we're going to sit down and spend an hour at the staff meeting with everybody there asking questions. What's working, what isn't? And then maybe we do that once for every project, but we go to them where everybody is there from, janitors to food service, et cetera. So I like both, but the more input we get, the better. But the one thing I would say is, Ms. Hall, I'm speaking for Ms. Hall, I shouldn't, but we've had in E1 and E2 and some of E3 in particular, we also erred too far on the side of getting local side input. So we go to a school and talk to 17 people, and somebody's like, I like fuchsia. Well, I like purple. Well, I like gray. Well, and I really want this wall to be curved. And there's a balance between what do we think is best for academic programs and sustainability and maintenance versus getting individual input from a principal who's going to be moved in 2 years anyway, but they like purple or they like triangular windows. How does that fit into our overall? So we need to get local input without getting local input, and we need to figure out where the balance is there as well.
We've developed standard operating procedures that are now being published or being used in our department, and part of them is like the change control process, and we have a separate change control process for changes that are suggested by school officials, because to address that very thing, is this something you want, or is this something you really, really need, and is it a one-off? So we can avoid that, and we've actually put in place procedures to require administrative approval up the chain of command when these changes are requested, to ensure that we're getting those things, because we want them to be as broadly applicable as possible.
Thank you. Ms. Hall.
I want to say something about my beloved Yamacraw Performing Arts Center. Despite all of the problems, it's underused, Dr. Watts. For some reason, I feel most of the district thinks that it's just for Garrison, and it's not. The intent was that children who are seeing productions in cafetoriums and that kind of thing, they can come and use that stage. And I think we need to get that out more and promote it more, because usually when I go there, it's a Garrison production. I don't see any of the other, even my Gadsden right around the corner has never been there for a performance or to perform. So I'd like to open it up to more schools.
So, as I said earlier, one of the reasons it's not used, the acoustics are horrible.
That's true. That is true.
So for sort of performances, it's really, and and if we did open it up, and usually people pay to use it, if I pay to use it and I have a bad experience with sound, I'm not coming back.
Now, I'm not sure, I would hope that if Gadsden wanted to use it, we're not charging Gadsden anything, because we just
Not
had
for another
we
school.
just had the Garrison Dance Troupe there, and it was a wonderful evening. Yeah, it wasn't the Met, it wasn't Carnegie Hall, but it was wonderful for those children. And if you've been used to a cafeteria, just being on that stage and there's a curtain and there's an audience, and that's important, even though it doesn't meet the requirements of our, So let me just say that for my Yamacraw.
Ms. Grabowski.
Just real quickly, so piggybacking on what you were saying about having the intent, I absolutely agree. If someone who writes policy for a living in ordinances, having a clear intent is what gets you consistency with policy but allows flexibility. So I love that idea. And on the idea of, having the design team or the contractor come in 6 months after, I think that's great. And I agree 100% that in-person feedback is so much richer and more valuable and triggers other ideas and conversations. I would love for us to do that on the front end. When I was on school council at Charles Ellis and we were doing some renovations then, we spent an entire day with the staff, and they were more than happy to do it, going through basically a design charrette, talking about here are the life safety things that are not going to change. This is what's happening. But what other ideas, what other changes could improve the academic teaching? And that's where the divided classroom, which is fundamental to Montessori education, came from, was through that input of the teachers that previously was not on the capital project list, but was incorporated based on that feedback. So I would really love for our process to include that pre-design opportunity for our team members in the school, the teachers, to be able to provide that feedback, because I think that's going to get us really the best value at the end of the day.
We're going to wrap up. I just realized it's 3:50, and part of it is, a lot of it's my fault. I'm sorry. But I want to say this. Please don't take our comments as being critical or disappointed. There's a boatload of work and thought and effort that went into not only the design guidelines update, but the scheduling of E5, the budget process, et cetera. And we see the mountain of work and attention to detail and thought that has gone into it. So we're polishing the silver and asking questions. We appreciate all of the effort that's gone in, and we've got a great team, and we recognize that. So please don't take our comments as critical. But you guys have done a great job and a lot of work, so thank you. And with that, we're adjourned.